So with this week's episode of Invaded, I have to say, not only did they actually go into some interesting info dump in a way that didn't feel like dropping that info, making us roll our eyes, actually getting a better understanding of the Wells and how they jump into people's identities, but you get some pretty insane and troubling backstory with our central character, and once again seeing another Well, and just the insanity that comes with it, which is always exhilarating. Something I do want to quickly bring up is, I saw a few different people just kind of speculating on how the name is supposed to be said, as I guess I'm not alone just assuming that it was It Invaded. That's just how I read it, and I guess how a lot of people read it, but I guess the actual name is ID Invaded, which makes so much more sense because you're invading someone's identity. Didn't even clue into me. I probably wouldn't have even noticed that unless I saw people. I had one person in my comment section mention like, hey, is it supposed to be ID invaded or It invaded? And I saw people all across the internet kind of discussing how the name's supposed to be said. I guess I'm an idiot because I didn't even clue into the fact that it's supposed to be ID, but that's the problem with the English language. There's always so many ways to say something and just interpret something, especially coming out of Japan, and I kind of love it and hate it all at the same time. But ID invaded definitely makes a lot more sense. But I guess the first thing I want to jump into is definitely what happened to our main character's family. I obviously was expecting it to be pretty bad, as look at the shape of him when he's outside of the Wells, when he is just a general person. We hear these things about how he's the cause of how many deaths at this point in time. Like, what happened to a detective? Because clearly he still has the skills for it, as he solves these crimes that no one else can. It's definitely very troubling to look at what his life was. Happy family, happy wife and kid, and just once he became a detective, that all started to change, and then he came home and saw what happened to his daughter. And they went into some graphic detail, I gotta say. Not only was it just disturbing to see what they showed us, but to hear his description of what happened with like collapsed lungs and just the idea of this mass murderer, crazy person just making her fight to the death in such a weakened state. It's understandable why he snapped, and based on the end of the episode when he gets this person to kill himself by basically convincing him he's a lunatic, you understand how he snapped, how persuasive and dangerous he actually is. This is a man who can simply talk to you and probably drive you to suicide. Granted, he's doing it to people who are trying to justify their actions. You've got a character in this episode who's basically just trying to say, hey, life or death, it's all meaningless, and he's just trying to capture a picture. He's doing something righteous because he wants to help people get to this end state, but Saikato just kind of exposes that, no, you are a lunatic who saw a bunch of dead bodies on the battlefield, and you're trying to recapture that picture. The fact that he's going to this extreme is understandable based on what he's had to experience with his own family, and had his killer been caught or something to that nature, he probably would have been put into a cell. And to see just how off the deep end he truly is, and just comparing him to when he's in the well, when he's basically stripped of all his knowledge and emotions, he's just the brilliant detective, and then comparing him to outside of that, and just seeing how, just even looking at his face, comparing the differences of a pretty like pure logic versus pure emotion, and you can just tell it's night and day, and it really gets you this connection to his character, making you feel for him, and you know probably a lot of what he's doing isn't right, but you also can't blame him based on just the glimpses we got into his backstory and how far most people would have either completely snapped to the point of no return, in his case, still hold on to some form of sanity where he can still be an effective detective, but clearly a little unhinged as of how many people now has he killed? 6, 7? Like, it's a lot. I actually really like the idea of how they're exploring his character, and most importantly, exploring the Wells and how they're invading identities, because it's something that they didn't really bring up too much in the first 2 episodes. It was more of just getting you accustomed to this world, which is a lot more natural storytelling rather than just info dumping you in the first episode, which drives a lot of people away. Show you the cool mechanics, show you the hook that's going to be this anime, and now with episode 3 with one person, clinging on to life, obviously she's doing a lot better now, but still, she had a run with a drill to her head and getting the information and how they choose people to go into these wells, and how apparently if you go into your own well, that's pretty much the point of no return and you're never going to come out of it, and it's a lot more safe to have like a detective invade someone's wells if they match their criteria, but even then it's not guaranteed that they'll come out of it alive, which just immediately gives you a good understanding of how they're doing it. Obviously we don't know the technicalities, we don't know how they came to create this technology as of yet, and I don't know if they will show us all that details, but as long as we have an understanding of how the mechanics work and the context of their world, that's all we need to see. This isn't supposed to be an anime where it's like, okay, we can go build our own identity theft machine and we can call it a day. But as long as they give us enough detail by the time episode 13 wraps up, which is the final episode of this anime, then they've done their due diligence, and that's all I'm going to ask for. And I have to say, this week's well, and just the idea of a sniper and just how that's linking up to this dead girl's body, I think is really interesting, because originally thought this girl was his daughter, but now we see it's just this person, Kairu or whatever her name is. But based on how, when he's dreaming outside of the wells, he does view this almost like his daughter. And I think that's quite like an interesting concept where you're not totally sure, is this something that our main character is just putting in himself because he's jumping into someone's well? Is this something that follows from well to well for anyone who jumps in? Or is this just because he blames himself for not being able to save his family, save his daughter, save his wife? Is this because of that every time he jumped into this, the reason he's such a great detective is because he has a guilty conscience that everywhere he goes, a dead girl's body is always there, which helps him lead to the clues and find the solution, but he'll never find the solution most likely for his family's death. I think that's a really interesting concept and how it continues to give it reason for him having basically no idea, no real emotions. He's just the great detective when he's inside one of these people's identities. However, what that does is it gives you an immediate connection of like, okay, how did she die this time? Why did she die this time? And how is our main character going to react to that? And how does he solve the crime at hand? And something that this anime is doing quite well is the idea of an actual mystery. A lot of time mystery anime, it just doesn't work because they don't give you any way to follow along with the character in question. They just have the character use some sort of ability or come to a solution that the viewer could never come to themselves. But here, you can actually piece together in your own way. Like, when this was happening, he's like in a tower, there's a waterfall, and then there's sniper shots, right? And every time someone went down, at first I was like, okay, I wonder if it's something to do with how they're laying down, how their face is being positioned. And then, every time he kept dying, I was questioning. I was like, obviously he's inside the waterfall somewhere, but what's the purpose of this? And once it really was starting to get going, alongside our central character, I was realizing that the people like crawling, that had to be the solution. I didn't come to the conclusion that it was going to be a specific character, but alongside her character, I was piecing it together. So I wasn't just watching a story, it was as if I was solving the crime alongside him. And that's what I really appreciate as of late, is that there's actually clues and foreshadowing. So by the time our character gets to the actual solution, it's not like he came to it because of some random power or mechanic that we don't have access to. He really did just think, and alongside him, we're like, oh, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. And then it ties into, it's like, okay, we have the criminal, they pull him out of the well, and then they can find him in the real world. Like, it's a really interesting mechanic to solve crimes by being visually interesting because everyone's identity is going to have a unique setting, a unique flair. But also, it just lets it feel like a really good mystery because there's ways to just immediately kill the character, pull him out, put him right back in, and just continue to basically rehash and rewind and replay the same scenario, but have it continue to feel refreshing because they don't overstay their welcome. There's this very select time that we're going to focus on a well, and even if we see him die 10 times in a row, it's like, okay, but now we have a good understanding of don't go over here, or maybe this is a clue. And I really appreciate that. There's actually good mystery storytelling going on here, and you don't get to say that too often, especially in anime. Hell, just mysteries in general, they're not usually all that great. I mean, just look at how many times Sherlock Holmes is in an anime. Like, it's not very good Sherlock Holmes, I have to say. Like, the good Sherlock Holmes, they generally aren't in the anime medium, and that's a shame because that's one of the greatest mysteries out there, right? So I really do appreciate that this whole idea of like invading an identity and solving a crime with this mystery appeal and actually have that feel like, okay, there's actually steps to follow, there's clues and foreshadowing. So even though, yes, we do have the greatest detective, at the exact same time, we can follow alongside him, and I'm sure there's going to be times where I completely solve the crime before either he does, or I'll basically solve it when he does, and there's going to be times where I don't whatsoever, but I do appreciate how there actually is a way for the viewer to come to the conclusion themselves, and you don't get to say that too often. And based on the end of the episode, at first I really thought it was just someone who was broken, he was just going to talk to this guy and just, maybe have a chit chat, maybe get pissed off with him, see a side of Sakato we haven't seen before. I wasn't expecting him to use his words to drive this man to suicide, but based on what's been said in, I think it was episode 2, about basically how many deaths he's caused, it seems like when they do capture people, more often than not, those that he deems the villain, he gets them to just go off the deep end and expose how shattered their mind is. And based on the fact that he is one of the people who we already caught from last week's episodes there with the whole drill situation, I'm curious what their relationship's gonna look like, because I don't think he's gonna be able to drive this man off the deep end. He's already pretty screwed around. I mean, he has a hole in his head, right? But still, it's like, I'm curious where the story wants to go. Like, obviously, I'm really intrigued to learn more about the mechanics and how they came to be with this technology. I think that's going to be pretty fun. I'm loving the idea of, like, entering in identities, these wells, and how every single time it's a unique setting and appeal. It gives the mystery new meaning, and it also is just visually interesting as the direction is absolutely on point. But the thing that I'm really curious is what's going to happen with our central character. He lost everything, and he keeps seeing this girl who then he blames himself because he can't save her the same way he can't save his daughter. And just, I wonder where they want to go with this and how it's going to link up, because I imagine by the time a certain crime comes up, it's going to link up to what happened to his family, and I'm curious what our main character will look like at that point in time, and maybe would he be able to break through and have his personality inside the wells, which hasn't happened up to this point. Like, there's a lot of ways that they can make this story insane, and they already have with these 3 episodes. Without a doubt in my mind, this is my favorite anime that I'm keeping up with as of right now. Granted, I've seen 3 episodes of this, I've only seen 1 episode of most anime that have started airing, but still, this is currently my favorite anime. I love it. I think it has a unique direction and a unique appeal visually and just creatively. It's something that you don't see too often, especially when you hear about like detective or mystery anime. They're pretty easy to predict, but this one is a very unique setting, and just the idea of stealing identities and using it to solve crime to then relate to the real world as you have people actually looking in on you is absolutely spectacular. In a lot of ways, this could probably be something that once it does have a dub, like fully dubbed, could just show it to someone who generally doesn't like anime. They're probably going to get a kick out of it alongside hardcore anime fans, and that's always a really fun feeling, because it allows me to get people who normally don't watch anime to maybe check out one and be like, oh, this is really cool, do you have any more like this? And I always love that feeling. But what did everyone think of episode 3 of ID Invaded? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Your favorite moment? What was your favorite part of this little well case that we did get experience doing this kind of sniper tower? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you have been new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.